Hello, and welcome to Student Affairs Live, the online learning community for student affairs educators. I'm your host, Keith Edwards. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm a speaker, consultant, and coach. You can find out lots more about me at keithedwards.com. On today's live broadcast, we're talking about student affairs, underemployment, and unemployment. This episode of Student Affairs Live is part of the Higher Ed Live Network. All of our episodes offer you direct access to the best and brightest minds in education. Be a part of our live podcast by sharing your knowledge. Participate in today's discussion by tweeting us using Higher Ed Live hashtag. Thanks so much to Erica Thompson for tweeting at Higher Ed Live and monitoring today's back channel. If you have questions for our panelists, please tweet with the hashtag Higher Ed Live, and we'll do our best to incorporate them into the conversation today. We broadcast Student Affairs Live approximately twice each month on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Today's live broadcast is powered by Platform Q, Education's conduit online engagement platform. Learn how to integrate continuous online engagement into your marketing and enrollment plans using Conduit using platformqedu.com. All of our episodes are recorded. They're free and easy to access in the video archives at higheredlive.com. Or take Higher Ed Live with you on the go by subscribing to our podcast. We're going to get a tweet out with the archives as well as some information on platformq.edu. This is the first Student Affairs Live. I think it's the first Higher Ed Live episode of any kind on the new Platform Q edu platform. So we're really grateful for that partnership. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a digital-first agency committed to tailored solutions that drive real results. Higher Ed Live, if you are a marketing or communications professional who works on your institution's website, M. Stoner's advanced marketing for higher education course is now available on demand and has something for everyone, especially those of you who wear many hats. You'll walk away better understanding your key audiences, how to create exceptional content with better planning, how to move your website from a capital project to an ongoing process, and more. We're tweeting out a link to learn more about the on-demand course here shortly. And now on today's awesome show. Today, we're talking about the experiences of being under and unemployed in student affairs. We know this happens in student affairs, but it's rarely talked about for all sorts of reasons. Today, we have four awesome, brave folks who are here to share their experiences of being under and unemployed in student affairs, as well as some scholarship around this. I'm so grateful for their willingness to share their experiences. I'd love to have each of you introduce yourself and tell us just a bit about your story. And we're going to kick this off with Conor.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Conor McLaughlin. I use he, him, and they, them pronouns. I currently serve as a senior lecturer in the Department of Higher Education and Student Affairs at Bowling Green State University. I've had two experiences of unemployment in my career. The first was after I termed out of a position that had a cap on the number of years the contract could be renewed. And after I no longer had that position, I was unemployed for about 15 months. I stayed involved in the field by doing some volunteer work and basically working for free for that 15 months before taking an interim position in that same office and then starting a PhD program. I also was unemployed for about 6 months after I finished my PhD. And the reason that I sort of left the space of unemployment was actually because I took a job outside of the field while continuing to search for a job in student affairs, or in the higher ed world, I should say.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Conor. We're glad to have you here. And many folks should know that Conor has been the instigator of this through some conversations that he and I have been having for over a year now. And so really glad for you to put this the idea for this episode on the radar. Let's move over to Geralyn. Tell us a little bit about you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Geralyn Williams. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I currently work as a program coordinator in the PACE Center for Civic Engagement at Princeton University. And my experience with unemployment came after I finished my graduate master's degree in May of 2017. And I was unemployed until around May of 2018. And at that time, I found myself kind of going back into retail, needed something to do. And in the interim, I was doing some consulting and speaking and things like that, mostly for free, just trying to, keep up on my skills and stay engaged. And then I was able to find this position at Princeton in August. And so I do credit my community and my family for really supporting me through this time. I don't think I would be able to kind of keep the faith for that long. And it's a tough journey, I do think, for, lots of folks that go through unemployment, no matter how long, but even longer than that, I think, it's an experience and something that I think we all should continue talking about.
Great. Thanks so much. We're glad you're here. And what is exactly your title there at Princeton?
So yeah, I'm a program coordinator. And so right now that means I oversee a couple different programs around civic and community engagement. Awesome.
And Alandis, tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alandis Johnson. I use they, them, their pronouns. I've been unemployed twice in my life, once between my master's and getting my first full-time professional position. I was only unemployed for about a month during that period. And then this period has been much longer. I finished my PhD in December of 2017 and have been unemployed since then. I've taken a number of jobs in the interim while I've been job searching, but I'm still technically unemployed in higher ed.
All right. Well, we're so glad to have you joining us today. And Mohammed, tell us a little bit about you.
Thank you. My name is Mohammed, and I use the he, him, his pronouns. I have been unemployed, underemployed, straddling that a little bit. The first time, both of the time they were voluntary unemployment, but there were reasons, some family reasons, and then I actually had to move back to my home country to take care of my mom. That was just the byproduct of being unemployed, but it was I could not have planned it a little bit any better than that. So I'm really good. So while I was overseas, I actually volunteered at a company because I was thinking maybe I will move back home. And that is still on the table because my mom is every single day when I call her, this is exactly what she says, you need to move back. And that's what the relatives tell me, that I need to move back. Everybody tells me how I should live my life. And that's what happens when you come from a collective culture background. Currently, I am an adjunct professor for Richland College here in Dallas, and I'm teaching a dual credit class to high school students. So I don't see myself as unemployed anymore, but underemployed. I could possibly teach a lot more classes, but then I'm also working on my dissertation and the revision writing of my dissertation that is taking a lot of my time. So I have not even been applying for jobs. The last one I applied was maybe early February because I came across the position. Otherwise, December was actually the last active time that I was really seeking for something and applying.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just want to thank all four of you for sharing this. There's going to be difficult things to talk about and difficult things to share publicly, but I really appreciate you opening up and sharing this because I think there are many folks, and some folks are even chiming in over Twitter about their own experiences. And I think even for people who haven't had this experience or aren't in this experience right now, they know people who are and want to learn how to support them. I'd love to hear from each of you what you've learned from these experiences. I'd love to hear what you've learned about yourself and what you've learned about student affairs as the work, as the profession, as a community. So maybe, Geralyn, maybe you can lead off with this. What have you been learning through your experiences about yourself in the profession of student affairs?
Absolutely. So I think what I've learned is that as a culture and a society, I think we're very much socialized to find our value and self-worth through, what we do, our work. And I think about like when you introduce yourself to people, a lot of times the first thing people might ask you is, what do you do? And that can mean lots of different things, but I think the most common reaction is oftentimes what your work is. And so I think for me, I learned about how much, of my own self-worth and meaning I had placed upon, achieving a certain level of, job security, a certain type of job, a certain way of being. That wasn't, coming to fruition right after graduation for me, and how much that, really took a toll on me mentally and physically, and took a toll on like my community around me. And so that is something that I've definitely learned about myself, and something I'm, working on as I, continue to do this work and find myself in the field of higher education. I've also learned there's lots of ways that I can utilize my skills and expertise. I have a lot of friends that work in education in different ways, not just in higher ed, or folks that work in nonprofits. And so I think this journey for me also showed me how I can, utilize my skills in those areas. And so, if higher ed, doesn't end up being, a forever home for me, there's other spaces. But it took a lot of kind of like working through my own mental stories and structures to be able to kind of consider those types of things. I think in terms of the field of higher education, I've learned that just like any other field and any other business, we see the same types of issues around employment that other fields do. And that also like our processes are quite long in comparison. I've had lots of friends that have gone into other fields and their, interview processes and application processes are maybe max a month versus, I think most of my experiences have been, 3 to 4, if not more months. And so thinking about what about our structures and what about our systems are in play that kind of, elongate and make sometimes our hiring processes and our staffing processes unequal. And what ways are we kind of replicating the oppression that we're trying to, change in our work, but in our hiring processes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a great suggestion and a great nudge for many student affairs professionals who are in hiring. And my experience is that people who are in student affairs roles, just about all of them are hiring in the hiring process of some kind at this time of year, to move those along, not just for their benefit, but for candidates, not just the candidates they're going to hire, so the candidates can find out they're getting the jobs, candidates can find out they're not getting the job and move on and engage in other processes. Thanks for that. Mohammed, what have you learned about yourself and about student affairs through this process?
What I have learned about myself is that I am as resilient as I think I am, and nothing really can beat me down. It actually can, but I know how to get up and start running again. I don't let anything get to me for a very long time. So that's about myself. What I have learned about the higher ed student affair is a position that is similar to a certain extent. If you apply, you can possibly not hear from the organization at all. You might get turned down saying, you don't meet our qualification. You might get an interview, possibly like through Zoom or Skype, what have you. Or you might get invited to campus for an in-person interview. So it's like there is no standard really, because you are reading the job description, you think, I can do this job. That's the reason you are applying. And one thing I do is I don't really apply to any job that I think, okay, I'm 50, 60% qualified for. I have to have almost a lot of those boxes checked before I do that. I always think about how they say, okay, well, women are the one who usually don't apply unless they meet certain percentage of that criteria. I find myself doing the same thing. So because I don't want to waste other people's time and get my hopes up, but unfortunately there is no standard there that I can say, yes, I will get called for an interview, or I won't, or what have you. Just sitting there in the dark waiting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this notion of resilience, that this is a difficult experience, and getting turned down is important, but to not take it personally is important as you move into this. And I certainly know in my experience, choosing candidates when you have 125 in a pool and you have 3 on campus, I certainly have turned down folks who I thought would be wonderful in the job and would love to work with, and have built those relationships. So, but it's hard when we don't get it to not create a story. And one of the things that I'm hearing from all of you already is being careful about the stories we tell ourselves. The stories we tell ourselves about what that means, or they didn't like me, or I'm not there. And then another thing you're pointing to, Mohammed, is already coming up in some folks sharing on Twitter about, nudging folks to apply when you don't feel like you're completely, I'm not 100% sure you could do the job, but to do some things where there's a reach. There's several folks on Twitter who are saying, my problem is not that I'm not qualified for the job, but my problem is I'm overqualified for the job. And so people are turning me down because I have too high of qualifications. I have too many years of experience. A PhD isn't needed for this. And so you're overqualified, and maybe they feel intimidated by that. Maybe they don't understand that. Maybe they're worried that you won't last there very long. But that's some of what people are sharing. And I think
other problem. I'm sorry. My other problem is I have a working experience in one area of higher ed, and then I have a voluntary non-direct work area because of my personal passion towards in this area, and then how I have combined them for my dissertation. So now I'm like, which route should I choose, and where will I really fit in? I can go either way. So that's another thing.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Conor, what have you learned? I mean, you've had some personal experiences which you've alluded to, but also doing some research and scholarship on this. So you've had an opportunity to talk to lots of folks. What are you learning?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I learn new things about this every day in so many ways and for so many reasons. Really one of the first pieces of learning that I did about unemployment and underemployment was learning that we don't talk about it. That it seems to be like an off the table conversation. It seemed to be a thing that we didn't necessarily know. Like higher education and student affairs didn't really know how to talk to people about, or didn't really think about a lot of the immediate and secondary impacts that it has on people. When I was terming out of my contract, the director of my department did set up a meeting with me to meet with our human resources folks to talk about what it means to apply for unemployment insurance. And in some ways it feels like that was above and beyond what anybody else has sort of experienced, or sometimes that's like the most helpful compared to the ways that many other people have had this experience. And so that was like one of the first pieces of learning that I did, was that it seemed to be a taboo topic. And I recognized this in myself as well, that I never thought this would happen to me. I thought I went into higher education because it was a foolproof career path. And I see now how that thinking was really built up on some really sort of faulty and problematic assumptions on my part, and some of my own sort of hubris and ignorance and privilege.
And probably reinforced by lots of messages from people around you in student affairs too.
Certainly. And so having the realization that this is a thing that we don't talk about, but that I was constantly meeting people who had this experience, or when I was willing to talk about it more people would say, oh, I had that too, and I thought I was the only one, or I'd never met another person who wanted to talk about this. I started to say, well, how come nobody's looking at this, or how come we're not having this conversation? And so when I, finished my doctorate and got a position and sort of felt like one of the things that it meant that I had an opportunity to create some space for this conversation. And so really wanted to take that opportunity up and not let it slip away, or not, become part of the group that goes back to not talking about it because it's not impacting me anymore. I mean, the reality is it's a part of my career trajectory, and I feel grateful to have the opportunity to talk about it as part of my career trajectory. But I feel like to not acknowledge that it is a real sort of formative experience for me would be to discount the ways in which it is a formative experience for so many people. And so I've learned so some of the experience has also been learning to value and appreciate it for what it taught me, even though it was really, really hard and really strained, a lot of my personal relationships. It was very difficult it created a lot of complications for me in being, a supportive and active partner in my relationship. It was a very hard experience, and also that it is also a part of me. And so honoring sort of both of those things is a process that I'm still sort of learning. And that I think having the experience and doing the research on it continues to teach me.
Yeah. I mean, you just reminded me of so many lessons about the hard stuff is hard, and we learn so much from it. And there's a real fine balance between not letting it define you and having it be a part of your story. And having it be part of your story is important, but not letting it be the story, right? Which can be tough in how we talk to ourselves. Alandis, tell us a little bit about what you've learned through this.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me. I developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma while I was working on my PhD, which really taught me what I want out of my life, and also how I want to live my life and prioritize my health first. So that really impacted the way that I went into my job search. And I think that's also why it's taken me so long to find a job that's really been a good fit for my skills and also what I would like to do. I've also learned throughout this experience how political climates can be. Specifically, most search committees are looking for a very specific type of person. And if you don't fit their ideal, extroverted, accommodating model, you're likely not going to get very far in the job search, at least from my perspective. I also identify as non-binary, so I know that identity impacts the experience that I have interviewing for positions, as well as talking about how cancer has changed my job trajectory. I've also learned that most folks don't really interrogate their biases when it comes to people with PhDs, trans and queer folks, and also people with disabilities and or chronic illness. That can be really tough to work through personally, especially if you haven't really thought about how you're perceived in the job market. And I think it's also tough because individuals with marginalized perspectives operate very differently in order to survive. We take on extra jobs, we do so much more within our jobs, so that we'll be seen as valid and credible. So I've learned that tough lesson that you have to make good use and strategic use of your networks throughout the process in order to really, really get in the minds of people that you're capable of doing this work, and that you're, that these identities don't define you. It's more so like they actually benefit institutions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing so much of it. And I'm struck with your experience with cancer and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, really clarifying what's important to you, right? In a broader scale. So I really appreciate that, and many of your suggestions around the ways that forms of oppression play out in ways that people aren't even aware of, or might even deny that is in them. Someone suggested as we were talking about having this conversation, let me know sort of, I don't want to say this out loud, but suggested that maybe more and more institutions of higher education are starting grad programs in student affairs and higher education simply to generate revenue. And then because they need to fill those programs, generate revenue, encouraging and funneling students into these programs. And some of them, when they're really intended to generate revenue, have questionable quality and standards. And then we kind of get this watering down of the content, of the rigor, of the programs. Are we creating more student affairs professionals than are needed because it fills a revenue need for institutions? And I'd love to hear from some of you about what you think about this. Is it seems like sort of we need programs to raise money, and now that we've got a program, now we need students, so we'll push students into it, and student affairs professionals have a wonderful opportunity because we work so directly with so many undergrads. Alandis, let's turn this controversy right over to you. What do you think?
Yeah, well, Geralyn had originally mentioned higher ed as a business, and I would say yes and no to this conversation or this question. I would hope that these programs are preparing students to be great scholar practitioners. But if a program isn't using standards like the CAS standards or Council for Advancement of Standards, or even using some of the ACPA, NASPA joint list of competencies to help, promote good work, I would really question those programs and if they're doing a disservice to the students. I think it's also important that we hope that students know that jobs are never guaranteed. You have to put in effort and also, have a good fit with an institution. But as we know, fit is also one of those forms of oppression that gets kind of weaved in through job search processes. And likewise, I anticipate that programs are going to become more selective as we keep developing new programs, especially top programs. And I would like to see maybe us adopting some different types of practices, like becoming more selective for those assistantships, like, other programs do with residencies and internships, and making it a really clear connection and value of their time and effort within a graduate program. I think also in this age of political precarity and dwindling budgets, nationwide, I think we also need to reimagine our roles in ways that help sustain our field as a necessary part of collegiate life.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's wonderful. Why don't you would you be willing to speak a little bit more about fit and how that can oftentimes be misused as a way to validate our conscious and unconscious biases?
Yeah, definitely. So, when we think about what we're looking for in a position, so for example, I put on my applications pretty clearly that, I use they, them, their pronouns. I have a PhD. I hear from probably about 5% of the applications that I fill out. So if you think about how things get unconsciously translated into opportunities for interviews or on campus interviews, if they've seen you and can identify hey, this person doesn't look like a normal person, or they have some kind of unconscious bias around race, gender, sexuality, ability, etc. I think a lot of those things get get funneled through the job search process, not necessarily consciously, but mostly unconscious.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think fit can often be a way to legitimize and rationalize without speaking to those biases. This person makes me uncomfortable for these reasons that I don't want to say. So I just think they're not going to be a good fit, right?
Exactly.
And we want to give a shout out to the folks who wrote with Stylus and ACPA, Debunking the Myth of Job Fit in Higher Education and Student Affairs. You can find that online. I'm sure Erica will be able to get that out into the Twitter universe. We want to unpack a little bit more of that. It's an excellent book on one of these bookshelves back here behind me already. Mohammed, what do you think about the student affairs grad programs, and are we creating professionals where maybe the need doesn't match?
Well, back when I actually accidentally came across my grad program at the University of Central Arkansas, and I had already resigned from my position and gone overseas for family reasons, and then I was going to come back. And I started from UCA because I wanted to see what do they have, and I found the program. And ever since I'm seeing there are a lot. I didn't know that such a beast existed, and I find now that there are lots of graduate programs, college student personnel type programs, and my feeling to that is yes, I think there are too many programs, and a lot of folks are interested in the programs, but I question if eventually these folks are going to be happy in working in the student affairs, in the student personnel field also, because I have seen from personal experiences, because of that revolving door situation, you come in thinking about, okay, this is my stepping stone, and you hate the position or your duties, your jobs, and you are not student focused, and you just do a terrible job. So your heart is not there. So if your heart is not there, you make it harder for other folks around you to do their job. We really need to also think about it. Do I really want to do this job? Is it burning in my stomach that I have to? I mean, is this my passion? I started, never mind, I'm not going to go into that. I really love the student affairs field, and I want to stay engaged in the higher ed, or maybe in K-12. I'm not sure if that's what happens, but I want to be in education one way or another. I know that, and my focus is student-centered. I'm very much student-centered. So graduate programs, I cannot say really that they are diluting the program per se, but there got to be a bit tighter grip on the rigor of the program. I don't know if it is NASPA or ACPA or combined somehow, or NCDA as well, in that everybody come together, working together at the those organizational level, and then saying, okay, as a combined paradigm, this is what we want you all to do. Another thing that I have noticed, a lot of the programs are very residential life focused. So if you are not in the residence life and have those expertise going into the graduate program, it is going to be difficult for you to go into another areas of student affairs. So that's from my personal experience and what I have observed over the years.
Yeah. Thank you, Geralyn. How about you? What do you think of our funnel and pipeline?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of what we see nowadays has to also do with, the economics of and societal changes in our country. So we can see that folks, go for higher education degrees because they feel like they need it now that, like, just getting a bachelor's degree isn't enough, or even just having a high school degree isn't enough to, be able to have a job that's going to help you live. It's going to help you, like, take care of your family. That's going to help you be able to, live your best life, and pursuit of happiness, and so, more people are staying in school and trying to find other ways of doing things. And so I think sometimes, we have so many great student leaders that we work with throughout lots of different programs in our universities. And that doesn't necessarily mean that all of them have to go into higher education. I think sometimes you get into this feeling of like, oh, well, you were such a great orientation leader. Why don't you go and get a degree in higher education and then, like, work in orientation? Like, if someone wants to do that, absolutely. And that's kind of how I ended up in higher education in some ways. But there's lots of ways that people can kind of utilize their passions and their experiences in ways that create change that aren't higher education. And so I think that's something to interrogate, I think, as student affairs professionals ourselves, when we're advising students about, where they want to go and what choices they have, that we're not necessarily kind of like projecting onto them in that way. And then it's also the reality that because, you need more money, you might need more job security for longer nowadays. We aren't seeing necessarily people retire at the ages that, we would have a decade ago. And so people are staying in positions longer and can't financially transition out into, retirement and pensions and things like that because of our economy and because of, societal woes and things like that. And so I think we're seeing kind of a little bit of this stagnation in that, there's lots of energy and interest around higher education and education and, how we are creating these spaces for learning and for change, but that the support is not quite there to be able to support people ethically through these processes. And I think something goes back to also thinking about resources. When we're thinking about this job search is that, if you have access to the right resources, if you have access to the right people, if you have, maybe some disposable income to fall back on, then you can be in a better space to be able to ride out a job search, to be able to access, certain types of jobs or certain types of people to be able to find things. But the reality is that, we live in an unequal society. And so folks are coming in and accessing, jobs and opportunities at different places. And so there's some folks that, really just have to take what they can get and take what they can find because they have, other responsibilities. And so it might not be the best fit. It might be a terrible fit, but this is what you're going to do and what you're going to put yourself through in order to, manage things, to take care of things. Or people will find that, I have a certain, needs or certain identities that, need to be taken into consideration in my job search. And the majority of institutions out there aren't going to look at that. I'm very real about my identities in my cover letters. And I sometimes think about, did those things factor into why I didn't necessarily get as many calls or phone interviews or, invites to campus. But I try not to think about that as much because I'm like, if they were going to look at, who I am and, how I portray myself and not want me, then I didn't want them. But that's also like, sometimes it's also a hard place to get to sometimes.
Sure. Thanks. Well, and Conor, you are now a faculty in one of these grad programs. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about this.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, retweet to everything my friends and colleagues have said because I feel like they were reading my notes. And one of the things that really stood out to me was that the one thing that previous literature on this experience sort of says is like an acknowledgement that one of the reasons why people leave the field in that tradition, in that like oft quoted, within the first 3 to 5 years is for lack of opportunity for advancement. People realize that, people stagnate or, they are bound to a location and there isn't an opportunity for them to do anything other than this thing which they may no longer want to do, and so it's time to look elsewhere, or potentially like they term out of a contract and can't find anything because of whatever circumstances. And so thinking about how that also plays out when you have when you have an economic downturn that really like significantly impacts higher education. So I was working for the California State University system when the 2008 economic crash happened, and we were furloughed, and there were hiring freezes throughout the system. And it wasn't just the California state system. It wasn't just California even that got substantively impacted, but there were hiring freezes. And I think in a lot of ways that I want to read more to see if this is backed up by data, but it seemed as though that was one of the times when people really stopped moving up, or it seemed like the traditional trajectory that we talk about in the field. You be a hall director for 3 years, then you become an assistant director, then you become a director, and then you either hang out in the director level or somebody brings you in to be an AVP, and you sort of move into the executive suite. Wasn't happening anymore, or at least that timeline sort of slowed down pretty substantially. And so thinking about how higher ed doesn't exist within this vacuum, that like, as Geralyn had said, that, and as Alandis had said, that, there's a lot of political factors, and I mean that both in terms of like our national sort of governmental politics, and also, sort of the broader notion of politics that play a role in like how higher education is situated within a system and is its own representation of that system. I think we, the emphasis on a gig economy right now can feel sort of incompatible with the very sort of career and vocational framework that higher education is talked about as. And that's not to say that either one of those is right or wrong, but just like, how do we make sense of higher education in a world that doesn't necessarily think about careers in the same way? I mean, if the average person is going to change careers several times over the course of their lifetime, having a specialized degree in a thing is going to have a different place in the world. And so, I think a lot of those, as I'm listening to my colleagues sort of share their brilliance, those are some of the things that are popping into my mind, or some of the sense and the meaning that I'm making of it, and deepening my reflection on my own thoughts. I realize I sort of spaced on what the question was, so I don't even remember if I had...
just talking about the pipeline. But what you shared is great. We did get a question. Someone saw that we were going to be having this conversation and asked, "How do you, if you've had unemployment, how do you talk about this? How do you manage this in the resume and on your applying?" We were chatting in our pre-show chat, and Alandis, you said you've never gotten this question, and I would love to, because you've been proactive about it. So how have you been proactive about it? Because I think that's a great strategy.
Yeah, so like Geralyn, like I include information about my identity in my cover letters. I make sure that people know. And for a lot of people, like making sense of like, oh, I was in recovery from cancer, so of course I have some gap in between my PhD and my, like what I'm doing right now and applying for all these jobs. And like just trying to make sense of like, hey, I've been focusing on my health so much that it like job searching has taken a back seat. So, that's not the most important thing for me right now. I need to get well before I can even do a job. And so I think, for me, it was really making the conscious decision to put my health first before putting other things first.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and that's a particular way to get ahead of it. But I just think if it's a question that a resume screener or employer or an interview is going to have, don't wait. be proactive about it and explain it. Anyone else have thoughts about how to manage that? Geralyn, I just saw you do the universal sign of waving your hand. So go ahead. How have you navigated this, or what suggestions would you have?
So I actually did get this question in an interview process. And so one thing I would say is also to think about this as a fact that like a lot of people go through unemployment. Like it might feel like, no one else is talking about this because we don't really talk about it that much, but there's so many people that go through, unemployment for even years. And even like the federal data doesn't count for that, because what's coming into the federal government is actually like people that are applying for unemployment, but you only get it for so long, depending on what your situation is. And sometimes also people, kind of get fed up with the system because it's, sometimes it's not the greatest. And they don't, check in to say like, I'm actually unemployed or I'm underemployed. So the reality is that so many people go through this. And so whenever I feel like, it's something shameful to share, it's that the reality that anybody can be unemployed in any second, and that there's no real security, at least with the way our government and nation is situated at the moment. But that's a conversation for another time. And so the way that I kind of utilized my experiences to talk about, that gap was really, speaking to some of the volunteering I was doing, or, how I was, I had a couple friends that were, creating nonprofits or worked at nonprofits and needed someone to come in and do some, strategic consulting and things like that. And for some of them, I was doing it for free. Other people did give me a little bit of money, which was wonderful. But being able to utilize some of those spaces to talk about, what I was still doing with my time in between. And talk about, how I was still working on myself. So if you're, reading, if you're, keeping up on things, if you have a chance to go to any regional or national conferences, if you're, volunteering with youth, if you're working in schools, if you're, doing anything else, doing anything, basically, being able to think about how you can frame that and offer that to say, I'm still active, I'm still, taking care of myself professionally and still engaged, and utilize that kind of, those types of experiences to talk about that kind of gap necessarily in your resume.
Right. So we're coming up to wrapping up our time here a little bit. A couple of things that I'm sort of hearing at the macro level, many of you are reminding me, I believe it's Gallup's research, is that that being unemployed is one of the hardest things that people experience. It took longer to recover emotionally from being unemployed and losing a job than it did from the loss of a partner or spouse. And I think you're pointing to many of those things where this gets wrapped up in identity and the shame, and don't talk about it, and you can't share it with others. This is a hard thing to experience. The other thing that some of the national trends around higher education and where things have started to bottle up, I've also seen that happen locally in a particular market. The VPs don't move on, which means the deans don't move up, which means the directors don't have anywhere to go, and you just kind of get this bottleneck of folks and opportunities. And then the things that I'm hearing from you all, and also some of the conversation on Twitter, is what a huge factor systems of oppression and unconscious bias are as part of this. A real call to be much more ethical about how we post, how we conduct processes, how we navigate that, particularly in being a little bit more transparent in how we communicate. I think a lot of people are not transparent because they feel like that's what they have to do in a job search process, but being much more transparent and much more nimble in our processes, so we can hire different candidates who bring different talents and different skills, do so more quickly. We can better communicate with folks. Some great suggestions. I know a lot of people are interested in how they can support their colleagues and their friends and their coworkers who maybe are experiencing unemployment, or maybe are underemployed. What suggestions would you have for folks who really want to be there in a way that is supportive and empowering for folks who are going through this? Let's begin with Mohammed.
I wanted to raise my hand because last semester I was taking a crisis intervention class for a counseling class for student affairs, and you are right. It felt like a death of a partner or a loved one, a parent, even if you are close, or a child, whoever you are the closest to. It felt like it was a death of that person. So getting over that it's very difficult. That hole, I don't think will ever fill for me. And even if it fills, the scar will be there. What others can do really is not do the victim blaming, because that becomes, you must have done something wrong. And there is, and that comes from another place. And I want to be mindful of that as well. In my absence, when I was gone to Bangladesh for 4 months, my ex-wife and kids were in the house. They were preparing for me to come back and sell the house and move back to Bangladesh permanently. And I was like, not until the last drop of blood. I am not going to leave, because nothing happened in Bangladesh. I mean, over here, I can go work at Walmart and maybe make my bills and what have you, and my mortgage. But in Bangladesh, I cannot do it. So their stresses, understanding where they are. They did victim blaming to not to that extent, but it was there. The undercurrent was there, and I could tell. I'm a smart person, and I had to remind myself. My son calling me, we talk very loudly, so it sounded like as if we were fighting, but we were not. And he was like passionately telling me to apply for jobs in housing and residence life, and I'm like, Adam, I'm not gonna be looked at because I don't bring any of those experiences. I have transferable skills. But somebody who is already in there, they are the one that are going to get the priority for those positions. So victim blaming, and ask, how can I help you? I don't know what you need. Don't offer unwanted, unsolicited advice, because you don't know what is going to trigger what reaction, what emotion. And you don't want to do that either. So I have to be very clear with everybody. It's like, don't try to help me unless I am asking for help. And the only person I would ask for help is my ex-wife, because she knows what I'm looking for in a job, and she will just forward me a job posting every once in a while.
Right. It's a great commentary about how this can be hard, not just on the person who's unemployed, but those closest to them, including their families, and asking people, what is it that you need? How can I be helpful? Other suggestions other folks would have?
I would say just know your support systems and what exists for, who's out there in your life that is, able to help you for whatever that might be, whether that's like reading a cover letter or review, like giving you feedback on your resume or CV or whatever that might be. Like knowing people at institutions and like talking to them, like saying, hey, like, do you mind reaching out about the specific position? It was something I was really hesitant to do at first, because it felt like I don't know, like I was taking advantage of those connections in maybe some like inequitable ways. But I've come to realize, like, no, they're there. They want to help you. And if I can have those people as colleagues, of course, I want to be able to work with them. But I won't, get anywhere if I don't apply. So yeah. And like, I know this is trite, but like, don't give up on yourself and your own abilities. And I think like we can be our own sense of like support for ourselves, and like taking good care of ourselves and making sure that, we're attending to the things that we need to attend to before this job search stuff gets figured in. So yeah, like take care of yourself first and foremost, take care of your responsibilities. Do that however you can, and use the people that are in your life, friends, family, or past coworkers, maybe future coworkers, to support that.
Yeah. So I love hearing from Mohammed. Other people, ask how you can help these folks, and hearing from you saying, ask for help. If you need some help in that support or reaching out, and that's why we have these relationships, is to be in relationship with each other. Geralyn or Conor, anything you want to add as we wrap up?
So I will take the opportunity to encourage people who have positions of power and influence in professional organizations to take some time to examine how professional development opportunities are or are not accessible to student affairs professionals who are unemployed or experience. And so I specifically talk about unemployment. That's a lot of what my current research focuses on, is specifically people who are unemployed. But a lot of the opportunities and a lot of the networking that has been talked about and a lot of the solicited advice sort of happen, and some unsolicited advice too, happens at conferences and at other professional development opportunities. And so if people don't have an institution to pay for them to go, if people don't have PD funds, if people's sort of side hustle that's sustaining them while they're job searching does not pay for people to afford $500 flights plus hotel plus to do some of the necessary additional work of doing a job search or of networking as a function of job searching, then that's one of the ways that the problem is going to continue to perpetuate itself. So I would say that folks who have opportunities to influence policy at the institutional level and also at the systems level for our field, one of the ways that they could offer support is by examining how the infrastructure is or may not be set up to support people experiencing unemployment.
Thank you. That's a great nudge that we not just get at the micro level, but at the macro level as well. And there are people who have not experienced this who can have a great bit of influence. Geralyn, any final words of wisdom for us?
I mean, I would just say, know that, you're not alone in these experiences, and that, no matter, feel what you feel, embrace that, take care of yourself because you are important, and that, your job and your career is not, indicative of your self-worth. Create a community around yourself, not just folks that are in higher ed, but folks that are in lots of different spaces that, will pour into you, whether that means, helping with professional development or just, reminding you to get out of the house sometimes, or, folks that can give you different perspectives, because everyone has something to give and offer and skills to utilize on behalf of themselves and others. And that can sometimes look like higher education. That can look like lots of other things. So also, think creatively about who you want to be and what work you want to do, and let that guide you through your process, and know that, this is not something that only you are going through, that there's lots of folks out there that are, right alongside you in this journey.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank all of you so much for your willingness to be on this episode and to share your own personal experiences and your own stories, to share the impact on you, and to be able to help others who are experiencing that and to help others help those who are doing that. And also some great reminders about oppression and unconscious bias and ethics, and how people who are managing hiring processes can do such a better job of that. So thanks to all four of you for your wonderful contributions. I think this would be a really meaningful episode for folks to come to and to watch down the road. Grateful to all of you and the great work of our producers and Erica Thompson, who's tweeting out behind the scenes. You can receive reminders about this and other episodes by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter or browse our archives at higheredlive.com. Couple of upcoming episodes on Wednesday, April 24th. Sonia Arduin and Becky Martinez will be joining me for a discussion about social class and higher education. And on Wednesday, May 1st, Brian McGowan and Dan Tillepaugh will join me to talk about their new book around men and masculinities in higher education. So those are a couple new ones coming up. And Tony Duty will also be sharing some new broadcasts on the Student Affairs Live website. Again, I'm your host, Keith Edwards. Thanks again to our fabulous guests today and to everyone who's watching. Please go ahead and make it a great week. Thank you all so much.
Appreciate you all.
Thank you. Thank you.